Waiting for their divorce hearing are Mr. and Mrs. C. Mr. C recently filed suit for divorce against Mrs. C and voluntarily made the facts in his case public. The grounds, extreme cruelty in the form of her refusal to provide him with decent meals, clean clothes, and a clean, pleasant home. They have been married 20 years and have no children.
This unrehearsed divorce hearing is not a reenactment. The couples appearing are the real people. Divorce hearing, presented in the belief that divorce is America's greatest danger to the home and the community, and that understanding is the greatest weapon against divorce. In cooperation with the American Institute of Family Relations, a non-profit corporation dedicated to the American home, we are proud to present its General Director, Dr. Paul Popenoe.
Welcome to Divorce Hearing. It is our plan to give you on this program a picture of the complaints and the problems of couples who have actually filed for divorce. We hope that in this way you'll get a better understanding of the causes and consequences of divorce nowadays, and that this understanding may impress upon you the importance of saving your marriage. It should be understood that Divorce Hearing is an inquiry program. It is not marriage counseling. Mr. and Mrs. C, I greatly appreciate your being here today as my guest, because I hope that by talking with you I can bring to light some facts that may be of benefit to a great many other people who are facing difficulties. Everyone faces difficulties in marriage. Those who succeed face them and work them out, and those who fail either won't face them or don't work them out, sometimes don't know how. Your situation is an unusual one, and in this case, Mr. C, you're the one who is suing for divorce. You've been married 20 years, if my memory is correct, and now say that your wife isn't treating you properly. Is that about the size of it? Tell us in your own way just what's happened here after these 20 years of marriage that brought you to this situation.
Well, as you say, we've been married 20 years. The first 15 years were fine. Mm-hmm. But about 5 years ago, my wife began to change completely. Up till 5 years ago, she weighed 120 pounds. But today, she weighs 180 pounds.
Not true.
Well, you can see it.
We just take these as approximations. Go ahead, Mr. C.
And this is caused by her eating candy. She eats candy all day long, out of these pound boxes of candy. Eats candy. Reads all these silly romance books all day long. Now this has changed her so much that when I come home, there's no dinner.
Well, you never take me out.
Well, I can't take you out. It's very easy to understand that, because you've got so much weight on you. When we go anywhere, and we go to a dance, for instance, we can only dance once, and then she's tired. She's carrying on too much weight.
Well, it's hot too.
That's another
I don't like
excuse.
to dance when it's hot.
It's always hot. It's too hot to make dinner.
Yeah.
It's too hot to do the housework. It's always too hot.
You ought to cut down on the beer and buy me an air conditioner.
Well, I'm entitled to have a can or two of beer. I work hard. I bring the money home, and supposing I have a can or two of beer, that's not such a terrible thing.
Oh, you bring them home by the cartons, those little cases.
So what? I bring home the money, and then what happens? You
Well, go ahead with the grounds on which you're suing for divorce.
She spends it all on charge accounts, extravagance, and there's nothing done at all. I mean, you know, I got sick of this, so I just moved out to a furnished room.
What have you tried to do before that on the basis of the 20 years, of which 15 you say were very satisfactory? Can you spot any particular time or circumstance that brought a change, or was it just sudden?
I don't know. It seemed to start about 5 years ago, and it's going on worse and worse. And
it wasn't sudden, but just a gradual loss of interest?
Sort of a thing, but it's gotten so that it's impossible to stay with it.
What have you tried to do to improve the situation?
Well, I've talked to her many a time, but it's always too hot for this, or it's too hot to do that, and she just sits and eats this candy and gossips.
We're quite familiar, of course, with cases of taking on too much weight, both in women and men. I must say, I think everyone else would say, a little more frequently in women than men. Perhaps they store up weight a little more easily. But in a good many cases now, I just have to say plainly, in a good many cases, a woman takes to eating candy as a substitute for satisfactions that she doesn't find in her husband. You don't suppose there's any possibility that you've been derelict in any way, is there?
Well, I don't know. Of course, it's hard for anybody to understand themselves to that extent.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why marriage
Oh, he's
counselors are in
always
the world.
bringing beer home.
Well, I don't think that's a
I can't
legitimate...
stand that drinking beer all the time.
I don't think that's a
Singing.
legitimate complaint. I mean, I work hard, so
Yeah.
I bring beer home and I have a couple of cans of beer at night. Well, I don't think that's such a terrible thing, but I try to do everything. I always try to do everything I could, and for 15 years it proved that we were all right, so I couldn't have been so bad. And I don't think I've changed. I still got my figure. I try to keep myself. I come home and I even clean up the
I
house.
haven't changed in that particular respect, at least. Tell me, Mr. C, in what respects he has changed, if any, that have made you take perhaps a little different outlook on life.
Well, he comes home at night, and the first thing he does, on with the television. Then a can of beer. It's the last I see him for 2-3 hours after the fight. Then there's the fight after the ball game. After the ball game is wrestling. There's always something on the television. I'm tired of sitting in the house. I want to go out. I'm not that old.
You're at home all day, are you?
Yes, sir.
You have no children, so
No,
that
sir.
you're probably not pushed very hard with work around the home there.
No, we just have a small apartment.
Yes. Couldn't you find some interest outside of the home, some
Oh, it's
activity
too
for the
hot. I
community?
hate to go out in the heat. I can't stand this heat. That's why I want an air conditioner.
Well, you can't spend your whole life just sitting indoors, can you? Even with an
No,
air conditioner, it would
guess
be more
not.
comfortable in hot weather, no question about that.
Well, if he'd help a little and get me an air conditioner, maybe I could do a little more around the house, have his dinner
How was
ready.
it for the first 15 years of marriage? Temperature was about the same then, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know. Our life was different. We went out a bit. We went out for dinner and had times, nice times together, went to the theater.
As you
And
look
then-
back on it, what brought about the change? Was it fairly sudden, or did you just gradually become less interested in doing things with him, or did
Well,
he
I
gradually
guess so.
refuse to do things with you, or
I
how was it?
imagine that's what it is. I think that's what it was. And
Have you
then,
consulted good physicians on your overweight, because it does affect one's health and shortens one's life, no question
yes,
about
sir,
that.
I did, and they gave me
Yeah.
all kinds of pills, but
Yeah.
I get so bored with the pills, I forget, and I just take a box of candy and sit and nibble and read. I love to read.
Of course, the pills won't counteract a pound box of candy. There isn't anything that science has found that'll offset a pound box of candy without killing the patient, as far as I know. It, in most instances, as you very frankly indicate is the case with you, in most instances it's more of an emotional problem than anything else, and has to be dealt with not only with a physician, but perhaps with a counselor or someone else who can help to take that side of the problem along. We've been doing quite a little at the American Institute of Family Relations with groups of women who were overweight, and of course you're familiar with these groups all over the country that call themselves TOPS, Take Off Pounds Safely, and all that sort of thing. There are a number of them in every community, and you can always find where they are by consulting the YWCA, for example, or the city health officer. He can tell you where these groups are. It would be possible to do, I think, a good deal with a good satisfaction to yourself. Have you ever encouraged her, Mr. C, to do that sort of
Why,
thing?
yes, I think that a person has to have the will to do it.
Well,
I just don't think she has the will to do it. I think she likes the candy better than losing the weight.
What have you done to encourage her and make her feel it was worthwhile
I
to
don't
sum
know
up
what
the
to
willpower?
do. I don't know what to do. I mean, I can only talk about these things. I can't
That-
physically drag her any
No,
place.
on the other hand, talking hasn't solved the problem, has
Well,
it?
then there's only a physical
yeah.
action, and I'm not a man to,
Well, I
to
don't
use
believe you
physical
can,
action.
don't believe you can beat much weight off of her either. But have you ever thought of going to a marriage counselor and getting a little help in a problem that neither of you apparently is prepared to meet, but that can be met and is being met by other people?
Well, up to now we have not,
Yeah.
but it might be an idea. To,
Certainly, a good many other people have found not only it was an idea, but a successful idea. I don't suppose that you would have any objection to losing 40 or 50 pounds if you could be more comfortable that way, would you?
Well, I love my husband. I'd like him to come back to me, but he's got to cut down on the beer. I can't stand that beer drinking.
Well,
He
I
drinks
don't...
so much of it.
Has he,
That's not excessive.
has he been drinking a little beer all through your married life?
A little, but
Yeah.
then lately he started
So
to
that
drink so
really
much
it's
of it.
nothing different from what it was when you married him, probably. You
Oh, he's
knew then
drinking a
that he
lot more
took
now. He's drinking a lot more now than he did.
I may be drinking a little more beer, but probably the reason is because we didn't get along. I don't
Yes,
know.
it's easy to see. You take the beer, she takes the candy. It's a bad method to solve the problem. It isn't really bringing the two of you any closer together or improving the marriage, and you're just tending now to throw the whole thing out of the window. Whether you're married or single, Mr. C, you need to maintain your health, and that's one of the first requisites to take into account. On the other hand, you certainly need to keep occupied pleasantly, and a woman who has no children in good health can find a great many ways to be useful and interest herself in community work. And as far as you're concerned, Mr. C, it appears to me that a good deal could be done to improve this situation before you really turn your back on it. You have an investment of 20 years in this marriage, of which 15 have been pretty satisfactory. It's highly important that every woman have some absorbing interest outside the home, not absorbing enough to make her neglect her home, but absorbing enough so that she feels she's an individual in her own right and has something to live for. And her husband needs to encourage her in that, give her every assistance. And on the other hand, of course, a wife has to see to it that she is doing her full share in the home as well as outside, and if she gets a little encouragement in that, if she's cheered on a little bit and made to feel she is doing a good job, if she has the normal satisfactions of life in the home and out, she can go along in a good deal better way. Right here is the time, it seems to me, for the two of you, before you go any farther, to concentrate on planning this marriage along the lines that any marriage has to be planned. You can't have a successful marriage, no one can, without planning to make it a success. It doesn't make itself a success just automatically. It continues to demand work all the time, and it appears to me that the two of you haven't really worked very hard on making it go. I'm sorry, but our time is up for this portion of the hearing. I'd like to thank you both for attending. We'll meet another couple and discuss their impending divorce after this message.
Waiting for their divorce hearing are Mr. and Mrs. B. Mrs. B recently filed suit for divorce against Mr. B and voluntarily made the facts in her case public. The grounds: extreme cruelty in the form of his refusal to allow her to have a modeling career. They have been married 16 months and have no children. This unrehearsed divorce hearing is not a reenactment. You are looking at the real people.
Please bring Mr. and Mrs. B in. Mr. and Mrs. B, we're very appreciative of your coming here today to tell us a little more in detail just of the difficulties that you have already made public in a divorce petition. Our hope is that if other people see just what is involved in a divorce, and frankly, if they see in how many instances there isn't anything particularly involved, it may help to reduce the tremendous and in many cases unnecessary and tragic breakage of homes on this continent. In your case, Mrs. B, you're the plaintiff in the matter. You're charging extreme cruelty, and the cruelty is, I should think, it might be fair to say, a little bit unusual in character. Your husband hasn't beaten you up. He has simply, you say, discouraged you becoming a professional model or something of that sort. Tell us the whole story, will you, just in your own way. What's brought you to filing a suit for divorce against your husband?
Well, it's the reason was we met each other in Germany, and 2 years later, Manfred was going then to America, and 2 years later I followed him. And 2 to marry him, but when I saw him in America, I suddenly knew I couldn't love him. So I married him anyhow because I knew my husband loves me very much. So I thought perhaps I could do the best out of that, but it didn't work out. And well, that's the reason now why but I think it has no reason anymore to try harder because I really did. So.
What did you do in the way of trying hard to be a successful wife in this particular combination? Because, of course, I'm not decrying the great importance of love, you understand, but in a large part of the civilized world, people marry and they develop love afterwards. And that's happening all the time. The love which brings us into marriage sometimes is a pretty evanescent sort of thing, and we find out after 10 or 15 years of marriage that we now really are in love, and as we look back we think, well, I thought I loved him when I married him, but I see now it was a very poor and weak thing compared to the deep and abiding love that we've developed between us as we've lived together and been makers of a home together. So that I can appreciate your feelings without perhaps agreeing that you have exhausted all the possibilities. It isn't so important to find the right partner as it is to be the right partner from one point of view. How have you proceeded in trying to make this marriage a success?
Well, I just did that what every wife is doing to make her husband happy, and.
May I ask a question?
Well, let me finish getting her story, then I'll give you the floor to tell us the whole situation all over from your point of view, which naturally is different from hers, perhaps very, very different. You have been working, I suppose. You have no children.
Oh, no.
And so you've been working, and you now are training or practicing as a model of some sort, are you?
Yes, I'm a model.
What are you modeling? What?
I'm modeling for photographers, for different photographers. I do
Oh, yes.
portrait work and
Yes.
and what
That's,
these what
hardly
the
a
models
full-time
doing.
job, is it?
No, it is not a full-time
No,
job.
and hardly a very definite and permanent way of supporting oneself. My friends in the entertainment world, so to speak, tell me that young woman needs to have a pretty good basis for going into that line of work. She'd better have a husband who can support her, or else rich parents or something of the sort, that it's a very misleading sort of a job. And it might be in the long run more to your advantage to have a home and family and model from time to time. You've had an opportunity than it would to throw over a marriage and go off on a career of your own. Undoubtedly you will marry again, perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 times, each time ending up a little more discouraged and frustrated. Doesn't that sound rather plausible now to you?
Well, I don't think I would marry so fast again. I would think more about, these persons. I actually knew it couldn't work out, but I was trying anyhow hard
You-
because I felt sorry for my husband.
Married against your better judgment.
Yes.
Well, now, Mr. B, let me have the picture as you see it, which, as I say, will undoubtedly be quite different.
First of all, I'd like to contradict her, which she did herself. She
Well,
said
just tell
that,
the whole story.
well, she said, before I forget, she said when she came to America, she realized that she doesn't love me. Well, why then did she insist on a church wedding instead of my plan going through with just a simple city hall wedding? She wanted the whole business.
Yeah.
Church wedding, white gown, everything.
Well, girls
Doesn't that
like
sound
that
like
sort of
love
thing.
to you?
Pretty hard to find a girl that doesn't like that sort of thing.
So I think she's just trying to find an excuse for her leaving me now. I think it's actually Hollywood and her career. I don't know whether there's another man. I have no way of knowing. And I think it just started in Hollywood since we came to Hollywood, because before that we've been fairly happy and we had our quarrels naturally. I think everybody has those. But nothing was indicating to a breakup.
You feel that it's just the will-o'-the-wisp glamour of the
Correct.
thought that she'll be famous and much sought after, and
Yes. And now that I've done my duty, I mean, I have brought her over this country and I gave up my career in New York. I could have been much better off there. I gave everything up for her, did everything for her, and now that she's got I even set her up in the modeling business here. I was foolish to do that. And now that she's got it, I can go.
It's just
I don't think it's fair.
the way you feel is that she just thinks now she's got all that she can out of it, doesn't need you anymore, and she'll go on to greater achievements and
Right.
greater conquest.
It's not true, no?
No, I'm not suggesting it is. I'm just suggesting that apparently is the way he looks at it.
Even though I don't understand why it should be a hindrance, because I did everything to set up a business. I went along with everything, and I was most agreeable to everything. And I don't know why she thinks I all of a sudden should be in her way in that way. Unless she has something in mind which she doesn't want to say here, I don't know. But anyhow, the whole thing looks very unfair to me, and because I tried my best and did everything for her, and now it's all over.
But
Don't need me
you
anymore.
say that he hasn't prevented you from becoming a model because you say you already are a model. He simply didn't approve of it. Is that the idea?
No, I practically set her up. That's a ridiculous thing about it. I came here. I could have stayed in New York. No, I went down to Miami, and I went over here, and I gave my free time. I was working most of the time, and I gave my free time to drive her around and introduce her to people and set her up in the business. That's the thing that burns me up. I mean,
Where does
if
the
I had-
extreme cruelty come in, Mrs. B? Is it
Yeah,
extremely cruel for him to set you up as in the modeling business?
Oh well, he really didn't set me up. I would have been a model anyhow. Yeah, I was already. Before I was coming to America, I was 5 years a model in Germany. I was beginning modeling with children dresses, and so when I was growing up, I did teenagers, and later I did film commercials and all that. I mean, it just is in my blood that I would be a model here too.
But how would you have done it without me? Could you tell me?
Why not?
Well, how? Just how? Tell me how.
Well, already many photographers and so were speaking to me. When they saw me on the street, I didn't pay any attention to them because I knew you would be against it.
Well,
And,
people
uh,
talking to you on the street, I'm against it.
On a very
Naturally.
conservative estimate, that is just a shot in the dark. There are probably at least 100,000 girls in the United States, all of whom are aiming to be models or think they are or something sort. The competition's pretty strong.
I took
well,
a
I
lot
know
more.
that, but I love very much modeling, and I can
They
say
all
that
do.
I was pretty successful. But I know that modeling is not a profession where I can support myself, so
No.
I'm working as a part-time as a waitress.
Since when?
And
Since when is that? May
Well,
I,
I did-
may I ask?
well, I'm still learning.
Well, as far as I know, you don't have any job, and you don't have any money, and you don't know where you pay your next rent from, and where you eat. I don't know anything. And
But I'm sure that the jobs come up next week or.
you're sure you've been sure for 4 months to get real big business and big money, and you never did. I
That's the
supported you all the
heartbreaking
time.
picture, of course, and we see so much of it here in Los Angeles, equal to much, I suppose, in other parts of the world. These young women who always see fortune just ahead. You both have given a very interesting and very clear picture of a situation that is all too common, and one that certainly doesn't hold at the present time the happiness that it ought to for either one of you. I really wish that we could give you a little help in working out your respective problems. Maybe you'll decide to go ahead and get a divorce. Maybe you won't. These things shouldn't be decided too hastily. From your story, you made one hasty decision. I don't know, you've been looking forward to it for some years, of course, when you were in Germany. But it's easy to take another step now that won't be easily undone, and on the other hand will, I'm afraid, get you into considerable difficulties with no husband, no job, and in a strange country with probably not very much of your own family over here. I don't know the circumstances, but it's a situation that we get all too much of all over the world nowadays, I suppose. I wish that you would come to the American Institute of Family Relations and let one of the women on our staff who has seen this sort of thing going on and knows the community thoroughly here, let her just talk things over with you and see whether perhaps you've exhausted all the possibilities that are in this area. At the same time, if you would talk with one of the men on our staff, it may be that he could help you in a variety of ways. I'm sorry, but our time is up for this portion of the hearing. I'd like to thank you both for attending. Some of these cases are certainly a challenge to a marriage counselor, and he can't help wishing that he had an unlimited amount of time to work with them. Obviously, when problems have grown up over 15, 20, or 30 years, they can't be undone in an equal number of days. But a very few months counseling are usually sufficient to re-educate a couple who really want to save their marriage. Please join us again for our next divorce hearing. Until then, this is Dr. Paul Popenoe wishing you all happier marriages.
Divorce Hearing is presented in cooperation with the American Institute of Family Relations. This is an Andrews Spears Wolfer production.